Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. It's my privilege to give an introduction of Dr. Giridhar Shastry, a renowned scholar of Vedanta. Dr. Giridhar Shastry, who was the principal of Sri Jagadguru Chandrasekhar Bharati Memorial College, Sringeri, also served Jagadguru Jyeshtha Mahasannidhanam Sri Sri Abhinava Vidyatirtha Mahaswamiji as the administrator of Sringeri Mutt for close to 20 years. Dr. Giridhar Shastry was fortunate to learn Vedanta directly from Jagadguru Mahasannidhanam Sri Sri Bharati Tirtha Mahaswamiji. He holds doctorates in both English and Sanskrit. He has been a mentor and facilitator of various Vedanta Bharati programs, including our retreats, our Bhashyamruta Vahini, a course based on Taittiriya Upanishad, which was conducted all across Karnataka, including IIMB. He is a practicing Vedantin. He practices and teaches Vedanta almost daily. It's our privilege to have him as a mentor and advisor for the Vivekadeepti program as well. I now request him to take upon the next session.
योऽन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाचमिमां प्रसुप्तां सञ्जीवयत्यखिलशक्तिधरस्वधाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान्नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम् वक्तारमासाद्येमेव नित्या सरस्वती स्वार्थसमन्विताभूत् निरस्तदुस्तर्ककलङ्कपङ्का नमामि तं शङ्करमर्चिताङ्घ्रिं वन्दे गुरूणां चरणारविन्दे सन्दर्शितस्वात्मसुखावबोधे जनस्य ये जाङ्गलिकायमाने संसारहालाहलमोहशान्ति. As per the directions of Sri Guruguru, I will try to present some of the salient features of Sri Dakshinamurthy Stotra. So the main purpose is we have to convey what is the content of Dakshinamurthy Stotra, why Dakshinamurthy Stotra has been selected, and we have to convince the others also. Now we know that why Dakshinamurthy Stotra has been selected. Sri Guru Gaurav has already given us the reason. Now the first question when we contact people, the first question would be, I am not qualified. I don't have that knowledge in Sanskrit, I don't have knowledge in our scriptures. Therefore, this is something, or rather I am away from these things. That would be the first reaction if we contact people. What do our Shastras say about that? Our Shastras say that first thing is you are qualified. So why any person is qualified? Because the person is capable of perception, discrimination, reflection and effort. These are the four qualities that are there in every human being. Whether we use those capabilities or not is another matter, but we have all these qualities. There has been our experience. Whatever we see, certainly we perceive things. Whether it's falsely or rightly, but we perceive things. We reflect upon that. We discriminate. This is good for me, this is bad for me. This is the right and this is the wrong. That discrimination is also there. Capability to discriminate is also there. Reflection. And then to make an effort, that is also possible for a human being, that is always there. Therefore, if somebody were to say that I am not, how am I qualified? So we can certainly say that because you are capable of these four things, perception, discrimination, reflection and effort. Perception is jnana, understanding things. Then discrimination is Viveka. In our Sanskrit, in the Shastric term, it is called as Viveka. And reflection is Manana. Chintana or Manana is reflection. And then effort is Prayatna. So these are the four things that we can certainly mention. And the second thing, most important thing which we have is the Buddhi. Mind and Buddhi, both are. Manas and Buddhi, both of them are there. They are very powerful instruments. How we use those instruments is another matter, but we have those two powerful instruments with us. So this everybody would agree. If you talk to them, if you say that you have a mind, you have an intellect, then they would agree. And we have to use those instruments, both these instruments, mind and intellect, for our own benefit. The third thing is, Parameshwara himself resides in your mind, which mostly we are not aware of. Parameshwara he doesn't reside somewhere else. He is there in Buddhi, in Hridaya Akasha, we say. So, as just now Sri Guru Gadavaru mentioned, that is the greatest force which we have. The Bhagavan himself in us, in our intellect, in our Hridaya Akasha. So if that faith is there, if that understanding would be there, then nobody would hesitate to act. Now, when it comes to perception, perceiving things, understanding things, there are some problem with the perception. So one is the false perception, the wrong perception. When we see something, we really do not perceive that thing as it is. We perceive it as we are capable or as we want. The real nature of a thing is never perceived if our intellect is not capable enough, or if our desires, our anger, our jealousy, all these come in the way. Then we will not be able to perceive a thing as it is in its proper form. And what would it lead to? It leads to pain or pleasure in this world and to conflicts, etc. That's how we always, there would always be reflection. Again, we said, I should not have performed like this. I should not have talked like this. So this feeling of guilt and all these things are because of this false or wrong perception. And there is right perception also. This right perception, it leads to a composure, happiness. And this perception, another problem with the perception is the value we actually attach to persons, things, our relationships, etc. What is the value? The question of valuation of things. This valuation also, it taints our perception. It colors our perceptions. Therefore, when we understand this concept of perception properly, then we would be able to rectify the mistakes that could happen in our perception, ultimately leading us away from the pain and all these things, and ultimately to realize that this Brahman or Dakshinamurthy, him is in ourselves, in our mind itself. Now the next question is, what is to be perceived? Perception of what? First thing is, what we have to perceive is the reality of the universe, reality of the self, reality of the relationships. We have the interpersonal relationships, and then our relationship with the world, with the universe, all these things. So this reality of the perception, reality of universe, reality of self, if it is perceived properly, if it is correctly perceived, then most of our problems would be solved. So we usually see the world as something outside ourselves. This is our regular, it's not so. When we say, when a question is asked, where is the world? We always say the world is outside. Anything which is outside is the world. That's how we feel. That's how we think. But here, in the Dakshinamurthy Stotra, Sri Bhagavatpadacharya, Shankara Bhagavatpadacharya, very specifically brings out the essence of the Upanishad, says that this world is not external. It is only seen as external. So a beautiful example of the mirror image is given there. The illustration of mirror is given in the very first shloka that is given. This image is given. Vishwam darpana drishyamana nagari tulyam nijantargatam pashyan atmani mayaya bahirivodbhutam. So where do we perceive things? We always perceive things in our intellect through our mind. Please just think about this. When I see something, though I see it outside, where do I perceive it? Do I perceive it there, in that locus, or do I perceive it inside, in the locus here? The perception is always inside. That's why the Upanishad says, Anyatra mana abhuvam gapashyam. When our mind is elsewhere, when our mind is otherwise occupied, even if we see some things, we don't recognize it. We don't register what we see. What we hear is not registered when our mind is elsewhere. So where is the perception? The perception is not outside. Perception is inside. First the mind perceives, then it is understood in the intellect, and therefore the real perception, the thing is actually inside us. So it is just like the image in a mirror, the reflection in the mirror. So whatever we see in the mirror, they look as if they are real, but that real is not the absolute reality. But even when it looks like that, it is perceived antaha, it is perceived inside. Therefore, where should we correct our perception? Where should we perfect our perception? Our perception has to be perfected, has to be corrected, has to be rightly understood inside us, inside our intellect. Therefore, the intellect becomes very important, the buddhi becomes very important. Therefore, Dakshinamurthy becomes very important. So this locus of objects, this is one very important thing that is brought out in Dakshinamurthy Stotra. So it is like, so we have to just reflect upon that. We don't have much time to elaborate on that. That itself would need a lot of elaboration, but I would just stop there. So the one karika from Manasollasa I am quoting here. Antarasmin ime lokaha antarvishwamidam jagat bahihi bahirvan mayaya bhati darpane swashariravat. All the things which we perceive exist here within. Within is the whole universe. By Maya, it appears as external, like one's own body in a mirror. So this is the first thing. Then another illustration that is given in the Ashtaka is the illustration of a dream. We perceive a universe itself, a world itself in our dream. There are a number of objects in our dream. We perceive them. So whatever we perceive in the dream, that universe which we perceive in our dream, when we are dreaming, it looks as if it is something external. We are apart from what we experience there. The objects of our experience there, they seem to be external. But were they there external? Were they there external to us? Never. They were inside us. They were all the projections of the mind. The mind projected things in the dream and we experienced those objects. But while dreaming, it looked as if all those things were external to us. Now see the reality. Reality of this universe as it is something external to us. When you take up these two illustrations of the dream and as well as of the reflection in the mirror, then it is very clear that whatever we perceive, it is in us and our perception has to be, or we are responsible for our perception, not the external things. Now, the next question that comes up is, so if all these things are there, everything has to have some locus, some substratum. So which is the locus of all these things? Including us, including our intellect, including what looks to be external, which is something external. And that great substratum which could support the whole world, the whole universe, the in and the out universe is Ananda. Ananda or the Brahman. And that is the only reality. So that is mentioned in the Ashtaka. Now, another thing which we can observe is, which we have to realize is, which we have to perceive is, that this self is the only thing that helps us in our perception, that actually makes us to perceive things. We may say that we perceive things. How do we perceive things? Because of through our organs. We have senses. So through our senses, through our mind, through the light outside and all these things, we perceive things. That's how we observe. If it is daytime, we have the sunlight. In the sunlight, we see things through our eyes. Our mind registers it, then we know. So there is a beautiful Ekashloki, one shloka of Sri Shankara Bhagavat-padacharya, which was chanted, Kim Jyotis Tavad Bhanumana Anime. It ultimately, it derives these step by step and ultimately shows us that all these things we could perceive only because of the Chaitanya which is inside us. If the Chaitanya is not there, nothing could be perceived. If we say that we understand everything, we perceive everything through our intellect, then who is there to perceive that intellect? That intellect has to be perceived, intellect has to be known. There must be something, some entity which would know that. And that entity is the one which illuminates everything. So that which illuminates everything, including the most, the innermost intellect of us, is that Chaitanya, is that Ananda, is that Dakshinamurthy. Now, therefore, there is another thing. Whatever is perceived is not the absolute reality. It is only the reality as we perceive it, as it is presented to us. Right. So this world, the reality of this world could be understood in another way also. So most of you are conversant with this whole thing, the virtual reality. Especially in computer science, we talk about virtual reality. Virtual reality is something, which a hardware should have performed which would be performed by software. Right? You prepare some program so that it performs the action of something which a hardware thing should have performed. Like virtual drive and virtual things. That's reality. So now what is real? So that reality of a software performing the action of a hardware is virtual reality. Virtual is perceived reality. It is not absolute reality. Now, why should we understand this realization of reality? So this is necessary for us to take proper decisions in our day-to-day life. So this helps us in evaluating our preferences, evaluating our own behavior, evaluating the behavior of others also. Once we realize that this is not the absolute reality, then we would not mind tolerating many things. The major problem that has been with us is intolerance. We cannot tolerate the shortcomings of others or something which does not agree with us. We cannot tolerate. Especially with the youngsters. The youngsters, they cannot tolerate things. Their tolerance level is coming down. It is very, very low now. The reason is this. The reason is they don't know what the reality is. If they know the reality, then the problem would be, the problem would not be there. So the level of tolerance, the threshold of tolerance would certainly go up, which would bring in peace of mind, which would also help us to rationally think and take decisions. Our irrational decisions are because of the wrong perceptions, the false perceptions. Now, the value which we attribute to things. So it is very relative. There is no absolute evaluation. It's not at all possible. Everything is only relative. So I usually give an example. If we take a balloon, a child would value it very highly. The balloon is very important for the child. And if the balloon is broken, the child would cry. Then for us it is just a matter of a rupee or two. Then we would pacify the child saying, don't worry, it after all costs about 1 rupee, I will get you 10 more. And when we purchase something which is very costly, say about a helicopter or a motor car toy, valuing 500 rupees and then give it to the child has the same value. The value of the balloon and the value of this car is the same for the child. What would we do to play with the toy for some days and then it would start dismantling the whole thing. Then we would be disturbed. We would say, I have bought it for 500 rupees and you are wasting it. See the valuation? In evaluation, our relationships and the work which the profession which we are involved with, all these things, everywhere we are evaluating things every moment. And when we know that this reality based on which we are evaluating things is only virtual, it is not absolute reality, then naturally our approach, our attitude towards things would certainly change. So this is what would be the result of contemplation on Dakshinamurthy Stotra. Dakshinamurthy Stotra is very succinct. It brings in all the most important features of philosophy, features of Advaita philosophy. Therefore, it needs contemplation, it needs reflection, but that would certainly help us in our day-to-day life. Now, realization of the reality. How do we realize this reality? Another illustration that is given is, say, to say that this reality is not absolute is our own experience. We experience everything in the dream state, and when we wake up, whatever we had seen in the dream, they become meaningless. Similarly, if we can start realizing the reality of the reality here, naturally, once that realization comes up, this reality of this world would be known correctly, then this absolute reality which we usually think is, that would change. And that is possible through the Guru's grace. And that's why we pray to Sri Dakshinamurthy as the Guru himself. That Guru Tattva, Dakshinamurthy Tattva is Guru Tattva, that is elaborated in great detail. But now I do not want to go into those details. Now, Dakshinamurthy Stotra presents another beautiful thing with a great example about the creation of this universe. So how this universe is created? Bijasyantarivankuro jagadidam parang nirvikalpam punar maya kalpita deshakala kalana vaichitra chitriyakatam. This concept of Maya or illusion is very important for us. Once we understand that Maya properly, then our attitude would certainly be modified, our attitude would certainly be changed. So the example is given of a seed, a small seed. So this seed contains that fetus which, when supported by soil, water and then manure, grows into a huge tree. Now when we look at the huge tree, what was it earlier? It was just a fetus inside a small seed. It was nothing but that. Earlier it was like that, then with the support it has grown into a huge tree. Similar is this world. This world, this whole creation was in that form. The expanded form in Brahman itself. And later on, because of this Maya Shakti, it has expanded itself, it has manifested itself in this form. So this whole world which we consider as the real, is actually a projection of the Brahman himself, or the projection of that great self through the Maya Shakti. And all our false perceptions, or all these perceptions, they are modulated by this Maya. Therefore, we have to understand this. Maya does not mean that something which is, we should not take it in a very wrong way. Maya is something which we experience every day, because it is something which modulates our understanding, modulates our perceptions. Therefore, once we understand that, then our attitudes also would certainly change. Therefore, the Manasollasa says like this: Sarve vikalpaha pragasan bije ankura ivatmani ichha jnana kriya rupa mayaya te vijrumbhitaha. They all got manifested because it was the whole universe was like a seed. Because of this Maya, which is of the form of Ichha, Jnana and Kriya, the whole manifestation has taken place. Now, how did this manifestation take place? The manifestation it took place with space and time, Desha and Kala. So Dakshinamurthy Ashtaka gives importance to these two factors, Desha and Kala. Both space and time. both space and time, they are relative. They are not absolute. Right. Can we perceive space as it is without any boundaries? Impossible. Please think. We perceive space only through something, some boundaries. If there is no boundary, if there is nothing which is perceptible by our organs, our senses, we cannot perceive the space. Therefore, space is relative. We have fixed we have some standards. This much is centimeter, this much is inch, and like this. So it is randomly done. Maybe there could be some calculation behind that. But it is not something which was not uncreated, which was created by us. And all our calculations, everything is dependent on that original thing which we formulated. That formulation is by us. It is not natural. It is something which we have created. Even with regard to the time. Time is also relative. The time is also, the standard was fixed or was created by us. Therefore, this whole creation, this whole universe is created with the help of space and time, which themselves are relative. So how much of importance should we attach to the space, the time, this creation, this universe? So, therefore the Dakshinamurthy Stotra likens this creation to what is created by a magician and what could be created by a Mahayogi. So the difference is there. Both the examples are given, Mayaviva, Mahayogiva. Mayavi is a magician, he creates things through his skill. Whereas a Mahayogi, without the help of any skill or anything, he can create things. And the example given is of Vishwamitra, sage Vishwamitra, who would create a new world itself. Therefore, in the whole world, the reality of this world is only created. It is not something absolute. Now, how can we understand then the reality of this world, or the perform, or what we should do, what is the value of our life, and all these things? They can be understood only through Vedas. That's very specifically mentioned. So, because only we perceive things which are within the realm of our understanding, within the realm of our reach of our senses. Beyond the reach of our senses, we cannot perceive things. Vedas, they tell us things that are beyond the reach of our senses. Therefore, this knowledge of this absolute truth could be known only through the Vedas, through the teachings of the Vedas. And the very famous one is the Mahavakyas, through the Mahavakyas, which establish that you are not different from that Brahman. You are that Brahman himself. Yad jagat karanam tattvam tat padarthasya uchyate dehadibhi parichinnaha jivastu tvam padabhitaha. There is some typing error. Please bear with that. So whatever is the cause of this whole universe, the creation, is tattva. That nature is mentioned, is named as tat. In tat tvam asi, the tat means that Brahman, which is the cause of this whole universe. And then that same Chaitanya, when it is limited by the body and intellect and all these things, the factors that limit the Atman, Pratyagatman, when it is done like that, it is called as Jiva, and that is indicated by the word Tvam. Now, there is another aspect the Veda itself declares that idam sarvam yad ayam atma. All that is, this is Atman. Idam sarvam, all that is here, yet whatever is all here is Atma. I am Atma. Here there are two words used, idam and ayam. So when idam is undifferentiated from ayam, then the nature of Atman is realized. So how does this do? What does this thing do? When you realize that you are the Brahman, you have unlimited capabilities, then the inferiority complex which is there in us, that would not be there. So we can overcome that inferiority complex and the other inadequacies. There are a lot of inadequacies in us. So all those could be overcome by understanding this. So first the scriptural knowledge would be necessary. Through the scriptural knowledge, we can gradually realize this truth, and through understanding this truth, we can overcome all our inadequacies in our day-to-day life, in our performances, in the actions, everywhere. And our world view would be most objective and pure. Now usually our world view is how we look at the world, how we look at the life, how we look at everything is subjective. But once we understand this reality, then our subjectivity would be lessened, and we would be more objectively, we would be evaluating things, we would be understanding things. And that would be a purer understanding of this world. Now, another important aspect that is brought out in this Dakshinamurthy Ashtaka is the relationship between perception and reflection, Shravana and Manana. So the first thing would be acquiring theoretical knowledge. So what we learn from the Gurus, what we learn from the Shastras, so that is the first thing. And then whatever we learn, it has to be reflected upon again and again. That Gurukula Guru mentioned earlier. So it is just not here listening to things would change us. So we have to reflect upon the things. Then only we could that whatever we have understood would be in that inside us. Therefore, and how this reflection could be done? Using logic and experience. So a lot of illustrations are given in this Stotra, which would help us in reflecting upon whatever we have learned, the theoretical knowledge which we have. Now another shloka in the Dakshinamurthy Stotra, it mentions about the false perception about Atman. So deham pranam apindriyanyapi chalam buddhincha shunyam viduhu. So this perception that body itself is I. Who? When we ask the question, who are you? So we usually think about the body first. So ultimately the body cannot be the Atman. Then some people may go beyond the body and say that the prana is the Atman, and the indriyas, the senses, and then the fickle mind or fickle intellect. And some people may think that no, there is nothing, it is only the shunya. So such perceptions are there. These perceptions are false perceptions. So there are a lot of logic based on Shastra, that is the Veda Vakyas, as well as the experience, which could prove that these perceptions are wrong, false perceptions. Why do we have these false perceptions? These false perceptions are due to the Maya Shakti. Atman as the eternal existence, Satyam, Sat. It is of the form of Sat. So this is illustrated in this Stotra by using a concept called as the Avasthatraya Viveka. So in the deep sleep, what happens is, our senses would not be there, our intellect will also not be there. But when we wake up from the deep sleep state, what do we say? I slept very well. Sukham aham asvapsam. So then how, when there is no intellect, when there is no antahkarana, manas, or when there are no senses, how can this happiness be experienced? Our understanding is happiness could be experienced only when there is some object which would give us happiness, when there is mind. But when all these things are absent in that deep sleep, but we have experienced ananda, then what really would have happened there? So in the absence of all these limiting factors, the Atman, the Atman which is the individual self, has become, or has identified itself with that universal Atman, Brahman. That which was preventing it from realizing that it is Brahman itself is removed now. The limiting factors are removed. Therefore, that existence is there in all the three, in the waking state, in the dream state, as well as in the deep sleep state. Similarly, while we are young, in our younger state, when we are in the youth state, and when we are in the old age state also, the states they change, but we remain the same. What does it mean? That this Atman is eternal, it doesn't change. And the perception of Atman is not done because the whole world we perceive in different forms. So we completely forget this Atman and the Brahman. We perceive things, perceive the universe in terms of cause and effect. Karya Karana Bhava. Then master, servant, or disciple, teacher, father, son, etc. So this is how in the waking state we perceive the world. Not as something, the Brahman itself, the manifestation of the Brahman itself. But Dakshinamurthy, by Anusandhana, the contemplation on Dakshinamurthy and the teachings that are contained in the Dakshinamurthy Ashtaka, so we would be rid of this ignorance because he has that Chin Mudra or Bhadraya Mudraya. That's how it is mentioned. So he has that Bhadra Mudra. Bhadra is Mangalakara. Mudra is there. So through that he would be blessing us. He would be there to remove all the ignorance which we have. So that is one aspect of Atman. Second aspect of Atman is of the eternal light, in which illuminates everything that I have already mentioned earlier. So in the infancy or waking states, that one which illuminates everything in every state is the Atman itself. And the states they vary, but Atman remains the same. And this is known through a prakriya called pratyabhigna, recognition. So when we say that pratyabhigna is soyam, so when we have seen some person in a particular place at a particular time with particular features, and after some time we see the same person in different times, in different places with different features. Then, but we do not take into consideration these space, time, or the external features, but we recognize the person. Yes, he is the same person, and that recognition of that person in different states and different times is called pratyabhigna. So that pratyabhigna is there. We experience that pratyabhigna every moment, but we don't recognize it. We don't contemplate upon that. Once we start contemplating upon that, we would be able to understand the reality of this Brahman, of this universe. Now, how to contemplate on this Dakshinamurthy? That is also given in this shloka itself. The upasana, the Ashtamurti form is given. That is in the 9th shloka. Bhurambham Syananolidom Mahathathu. So we have to go from the known to the unknown. So whatever we experience here our known things. We graduate from these known things too, through contemplation and all these things, so upasana, we move into the unknown realm. And then we would be able to realize that upasana is there. That is also mentioned in the Dakshinamurthy Stotra. Now, how should we do this sadhana? That is also mentioned in the last part, Shravana, that is perception, Manana, reflection and contemplation, then Dhyana, meditation upon that, and then Sankirtana is recitation. So, I have tried to bring out the salient features of Dakshinamurthy Stotra, only a few, because every shloka, it needs to be elaborated in detail. And Professor D.S. Subramaya, who was a great scholar of physics, he was a direct student of Dr. C.V. Raman, and who was highly blessed by the three acharyas of Sringeri, three Jagadgurus of Sringeri, who learned Vedanta under such stalwarts like Subramanya Shastry and V.S. Ramachandra Shastry. So he has written a beautiful work of 2 volumes on Dakshinamurthy Stotra. So every aspect of that Dakshinamurthy Stotra is explained in detail there, with all the necessary authorities from other texts, mainly the Shankara Bhashya, the Bharma Sutras and all these things. And the translation is also available. Originally is in English. You can imagine how anything that is presented in 2 huge volumes have to be summarized here. So I may have erred in some of the parts, but the major thing which we have to observe is, so when we are trying to convince others, when we are trying to tell others about the Dakshinamurthy, this Vivekadeepti program, what is the intention of Acharya? That we have already listened from himself. But we have to mention this. This is the time, the youth is the time, this period is the time where we take decisions, and any decision that we take now would impact our whole life, not only our life, the lives of the people who are connected with us, who are dependent on us, who are connected with us. So the decisions have to be very rational. They have to be very down-to-earth things. Therefore, at this moment, what plays importance is our realization of this world, the realities of this world, the priorities, the evaluation of things and all these things. The most important factors that would govern our decisions, they are presented in Dakshinamurthy Stotra. So when we know those things, when we understand those things, certainly our attitude towards life would change, our priority would change, the road map which we would be drawing for the whole life would be a better one, would be a perfect one. So that was the intention of Sri Guru Galavaru to initiate this Vivekadeepti program. Of course, you would be made known about all the details in this stotra, in the courses. I think this much of understanding of Dakshinamurthy Stotra would be helpful for us to convey why this is necessary for us. So thank you very much.